Hi, friends. Welcome to the Genesis of Shame podcast. I'm your host, Sam Landa, and I'm here to help you speak biblical truth to the shame you experience in relationships. My hope is that you grow in your understanding of how shame impacts you so you can learn how to connect with God and others. If you've experienced fear, hiding who you are, boundary issues, anxiety, and/or depression in your relationships, then this podcast is for you. It's time to speak truth to your shame. All right, well, welcome back to the Genesis of Shame. We are in season 3, and I'm really excited about just continuing this season because we're talking about so many different aspects of shame. I mean, we talked about pornography and shame. We talked about shame within marriage, shame in relationships. And today we're talking about anger and shame, and really starting from young, childhood, essentially, with our guest, Erin Winters. Erin Winters is a wife, mother, and LPC, and she is also starting Snowfall Publications, an author. So welcome, Erin, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Erin, usually when I'm having these initial conversations, I'm learning more about the person. And in these last couple of years, I've seen you've been very active with writing books and now starting this publication, Snowfall Publications. So you've been busy these last couple of years, and we've known each other for about, I think, 6 years around there.
It's a long time.
So this is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Really exciting, not kind of, really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, and it's cool to touch base again because, we've known each other a long time, but we haven't actually been able to catch up much with kids and all the things happening. Mm-hmm. It's possible that I'm a little bit crazy trying to do all the things at once. But I'm excited. I've really enjoyed it. I'm still working. I'm spending time at home with my 2 kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. Mm-hmm. And I'm also, working as an LPC part-time as well. I wanted to cut down a little bit so I have more family time. And then I started my publishing company and I'm writing books.
That's awesome. It's so awesome. And, especially seeing from where we started from, I think it goes way back GSA, church, everything else. Now we have our kids, own kids. And so it's been really cool to just see the progression of our lives. So great to have you on the show. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into your latest book.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you already said my name's Erin. That's still true. So there's that. Licensed professional counselor. I'm really enjoying, I just enjoy connecting with people. I've always thought that small talk is like a necessary evil, When I met my husband, George, who you know, of course, one of the first things that we talked about was that I thought small talk was so annoying. And he kind of jumped right in there with me. It was like, yeah. And then we talked about like real life things, and connected over that, which is cool. So I like that. What else do I say about myself? What do people say? I like fuzzy sacks and blankets a lot, and hanging out with my goofball kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great parenting. And it seems like that was kind of the inspiration maybe for your new book. Tell us a little bit about that. What
inspired
and how that started.
Yeah. So the first book that I had written is a fantasy novel, and I have another one that's almost done. But over this past, so my second son was born in November, and during pregnancy, it took all my writing time, by napping and eating and all the pregnancy things, basically. So I ended up, the novels, it's a different kind of headspace to be in. So what I ended up doing was I ended up doing these kids books, which I didn't expect, but yeah, it's all based on things that happened with my son, my older son, August. And the first one is called The Gremlin in My Couch. And that's just a goofy, like whimsical, funny sort of book. And then the other one is I Love You When You're Angry, which is what, we're probably primarily going to talk about today. They're both off of specific things with my kids. I Love You When You're Angry basically started with, I had just had a rotten day with we just had a hard day. We both had, we both had a hard day. And I think sometimes as adults we can forget that. We can say like, oh, they're being problematic today. It's like, well, I'm being problematic when I'm having a bad day. It's not that he's problematic and I'm having a bad day. It's like he's having a hard day too, So we both had a particularly horrible day. And I just remember thinking like, I didn't do that the way that I wanted to. I didn't handle that the way that I should have. And I want him to know that how I act, sometimes I'm not going to act the way that I'm supposed to. Sometimes I am going to get frustrated and huffy with him. And that's not about him. That's about me. And it doesn't impact how much I love him. And then on the flip side, he can't earn my love by being extra good. I'm going to love him anyway. And he can't act up so bad that I stop loving him. Like it's an unconditional love. Hopefully as I attempt to make it as close to God as I can, that unconditional love. But a parent or caregiver, that's one thing about this book that has spoken to a lot of people, it seems like, is that it's not just for parents, it's for any caregiver, blended families, foster families. It's not specific. Sometimes blended and foster families and those sorts of situations, it's hard to find a book that doesn't specifically say mom and dad and things like that. And this one doesn't. It would work for teachers as well, clinicians, play therapy. I've got some colleagues that are very excited to check that out. But yeah, that's it. Well, I have the paperback proof here. The hardback I'm waiting on, but the proof looks like this. I'm so proud of my illustrator. She's awesome. She's amazing. This is I love him. He's super cute. So there's different forest animals on each spread. So this one we talked about, it's a rhyming book, and I was like, make her more frazzled, make her eyes crazier, because that's how it feels some days. And then the same thing, so like, but we have a mix. So, some days are rotten, and then there's some things that we enjoy. Here's Fame Bear. Anyway, he's super cute. I gave her ideas, and then she either made them better or came up with better ones altogether.
That's great. So you're really involved in the process of the emotional expression of it and the facial expressions, gestures, I'm assuming.
Very much. Yeah. Okay. So she sends me sketches. I've got some, if you want to see, if anybody wants to see, you go to Snowfall Publications on the Facebook or Instagram or wherever. There's some behind the scenes things that you can see some of the sketches and kind of that process. But every time we do a spread, she sends me a sketch of what it looks like, and then I can change things or suggest that the posture be different, especially with an emotion book, and both being a mom, but just being an LPC, like the emotions have to be specific. They have to be, I'm particular. I'm particular. We spent a little bit of time on eyebrows at one point. Like we talk a lot about that. I was like, this one looks off. It looks like this. And I'm sending her like all these like GIFs and stuff. Like I'm sending her all these pictures or whatever. We spent a little bit of time on this little dude's eyebrows. I wanted it to just be just so. And then at the end, I know we didn't really get to this yet, but at the end I have a feelings chart to use. So it's therapeutic in nature anyway, but there's a feelings chart you can download for free right now if you want to just have the tool. But to just kind of foster that conversation with kids, sometimes it's frustrating to talk to kids about emotions because they don't know what they're feeling. They can't identify it, or if they can, they just don't know what to do with it or how to talk about it. So this is a way to open up that conversation and to use visuals that really help, and also kind of including some hand motions too, because sometimes feelings charts are just the face. So this is the feelings chart in the back with some of the basic emotions in it. The confused little bunny is my favorite one.
Yeah, I guess.
And then on the other side, I've got interactive questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was a delay. Go ahead.
I'll use the ashamed guy for this podcast episode.
Yeah. There you go. This is for you.
Yeah. That's good.
Speaking of shame, it's because it's not just sad. I loved how creative she was in doing that, like with the water around him, that he's just kind of like shrinking and wants to hide. It's not just sad, but like, I don't know. There's something about the body language has to be just right,
Mm-hmm.
For a kid to be like, yes, that's what I'm feeling, and for it to translate correctly.
So
So
this is
yeah,
something
so
you would
this has
show
some things that
to
are,
the kids, and then they would point to what they think, what they're feeling.
yeah,
Okay, that's
absolutely. So
cool.
you could say, which one of these are you? I know some people have put a feelings chart like in their office if they're a clinician or a teacher on the wall. Even moms
Mm,
sometimes will put them like on the door, or parents or whoever. And then you can check in. It could be like a nightly ritual, How are you feeling today? Or what was today like for you? Right. And then
mhm.
have something to refer back to. Or in that moment at the end of the book, it's a kind of pressure free way to do that. And there's lots of options on there. You don't have to go through all of the therapeutic questions or like the check-in kind of things, but it's a cool way to engage a child,
Yeah.
and for parents too. Sometimes adults have a hard time identifying it. So some of these are look back through the book, because if you work with a kid and his or her emotions, sometimes they need some distance from the topic, like it's too big. So I've worked with kids in home and on the child and adolescent psychiatric unit. I've done some of that work before, and sometimes if you use a puppet or a stuffed animal or something, instead of being like, well, what makes you angry, sometimes that's like too much, it's too close,
Mm,
and so if you say, Fluffy is angry, what do you think Fluffy's angry about? Sometimes that gives just enough distance that they'll say something very specific. Well, Fluffy's angry because his mom didn't do X, Y, and Z. And then they're like, oh man, yeah, okay, so that sounds really frustrating for Fluffy. And then you can talk about it without talking to them about that thing. It just makes them more comfortable with it. So I have two ways to do it. I've got some direct, what are you feeling right now? What do you do when you feel that way? And then I have look back through the book. The bunny was really like frazzled. I don't say frazzled. What do you think they're so frazzled about? That kind of stuff. So I kind of try to mix it up depending on your kid and on you.
that's awesome. It's a great resource. So for those of you guys, parents who have younger kids who really want to focus in on this aspect of these strong emotions, these are strong emotions, right? Very strong. And sometimes as parents, and I think this is kind of
Yeah,
what interested me in having this conversation, is that sometimes I see the emotion and I don't know what to do with it, because maybe I don't even know what to do when I experience that, which kind of leads to this
right.
idea of a parent shame. There's this parent shame. I can't handle my kid's emotion
Mm,
as well as I would like, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think that speaks to a lot of parents, and it's not just anger. There's a bunch of different emotions, but anger has that strong trigger, right? If something doesn't go my way, if I don't get what I want, what have you.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think one question that parents might have is, do do some parents have naturally angry kids?
I so my perspective on it is that kids will express emotion in different ways.
Mhm.
So for kids, a lot of things will come out as anger, whereas adults
Mm,
have a little bit more, sometimes have more options, I guess you could say. So for an adult kind of scenario, I guess, let's say trauma is coming out like in adulthood, right? So
mhm,
trauma, they might turn to drugs to numb their emotions so that they don't have to feel. They might turn to, like relationships to fill a void in their life. They could turn to, just throwing themselves into work that could be equally unhealthy depending on how they do it. All these things that they're just trying to like fill it up with, or it comes out somehow. It has to.
mhm.
Because it's like I like to tell my clients, it's like you're stuffing stuff under the rug so much that your rug is 4 feet off the floor. Like you're not fooling anybody at this point. Like at some point, it's gonna spill out.
Mhm.
And I think adults sometimes have different ways to hide it or different ways to try. And kids have kind of a more limited way for that to come out.
Right.
And so you'll see grief a lot of times as anger as well, not just sadness. You'll see it
Mm,
as, as anger. You'll see almost any emotion kind of when they're anxious or scared. A lot of times that comes out as angry, which is very confusing for both the kid and the parent.
mhm, mhm,
What is it? How do I know which one it is? What do I do with that? So I think some kids and people really are more likely um, to choose one outlet over another.
mhm,
Why do some people end up punching the fridge and other people go cry in their room when they're upset? You know,
mhm,
part of that is going to be just who they are in their personality. Part of that is going to be environment. What do they see when they grew up? What are they
mhm.
seeing you do when you're upset? My husband's trying to do this. It hasn't sunk in yet, but we're hoping that it will.
Yeah.
Trying to do with August, my 2-year-old, like, okay, like if he's angry, we're gonna breathe, and George will breathe for him to do, or what's something that a kid can always have access to. Well, windows is probably one. So I try to, do you need a minute? Do you want to go look out the window? And finding different things that could engage him, and then we can talk about it. Because one thing that we don't want to do is, if your brain is on fire, if it's like freaking out, sorry, this is a hand model of the brain I use. If your brain is on fire and it's like freaking out, you're not going to process new information well, right? Like if the Titanic's hit the iceberg, people are in the water, then they throw a grand piano on top. This is not a good time to learn how to swim, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for kids and for people in general, it's sort of like that. Like, okay, in this moment, we're at a 10 or we're at a 20 out of 10. It feels huge. We're overwhelmed. Don't explain anything. Say very little to nothing, right? Mm-hmm. If you must say something, make it short, make it concise and clear, and then wait it out. Sit with them, or if they need some space, give them some space or whatever, but offering that, I guess, to them as well. I think I may have lost track of if I answered your original question, but
no, you did. And I think, okay. So with you kind of alluded to it a little bit, based on what they see in their environment, do kids express anger the same way that parents do? And are they able to, I think, at what age do they start identifying what it actually is? And I think your feelings chart speaks to that. But how do we help parents who maybe blame themselves? Because I have seen that too, where they blame, my kids like this because of me. I've seen it more so in Christian circles, like they'll talk about the generational sin, generational curse.
Which is part of the shame part. Yep. It's not just, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. So I want to put it out a disclaimer that if you have a child that's struggling with this, and first of all, if you're a parent, you probably do, because it's a continuum, because your child is feeling feelings does not mean necessarily that you have done something to contribute to it. It's important to assess, because if you have, you also don't want to be one of the people who says, here, I'll dump off my kid at therapy and just you fix them, because it may very well be that the therapist comes back to you and says, please join us. A, because it's important in general for you to understand what's going on, and B, because maybe you were part of it. And if you were, I don't want to say across the board, it's not you, don't worry, feel better, because it might be, I don't know you, right? Mm-hmm. If it is, just assess it. And at the same time, it's not always, even extreme behaviors, sometimes they come up and there's not a trauma background. And you see things that look similar. So, okay, so this is mimicking that. What is that about? And if it becomes that extreme, I would really recommend getting either intensive in-home or play therapy, because kids process things differently. You will see that a lot of adults that I talk to sometimes are confused about play therapy, right? They're like, they just play with toys, or they tell the kid, and I have another kids book that I'm hoping to do soon called When a Donut Goes to Therapy, talking about play therapy, what that looks like, normalizing it. They say, like, you have to go and talk to somebody. And this 5-year-old kid is like, talk, and sometimes the therapist is like, talk. They don't have to talk. They can process it in other ways too. Anyways, so it comes out differently. And so it's not necessarily always a parent's fault. A parent needs to be involved and do as much as they can and learn and, be willing to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Part of the biggest thing is going to be, what do you do when you make mistakes? Show your kid. I still remember, gosh, when I was 5 or 6 or something, my dad came and apologized to me after I had been a major brat. I don't remember what I did, but I remember I was being a major brat. And I was sent to my room. And I went to my room all huffy and mad and like really proud, like, and I had not apologized, nor did I plan to. And he came up and sat on the end of my bed, and he apologized to me when there was no reason that he shouldn't. I mean, so he said, he didn't act the way that he wanted to, and he apologized to me. And that was, I don't know that I was humbled in the moment, but I'm like humbled right now just thinking about it. Like the fact that a grown man came to his bratty kid who super deserved it, right? And said, hey, listen, like that approach wasn't the way to go, was so meaningful to me. Like, I don't remember what it was about, but I still remember that happened. Being willing to do that doesn't make you small. It makes you strong. It makes you a model for your kids. That's huge. It's huge. And I'm trying to do that with my kids as well. So learn, be open, be willing to be curious about your child. Know that therapy or feelings charts or whatever it is that you're using, they're tools. They're tools. It doesn't mean that you failed. It's like going to the doctor. You don't wait until you get an infection if you break your arm and things are open and stuff. No, like you go now. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. You know, it makes you resourceful. It makes you independent as a parent. So using those things, anyway, that's kind of my soapbox.
No, that's helpful because I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, do you think parents who have a difficult time managing their own emotions are able to teach this to their kids? So essentially, even as we think about your book, the
Right.
feelings chart, parents might have a range of those emotions and not know how to deal with it themselves, but would they be able to have your book, go through it and teach it to their kids, or even they themselves learn kind of what that looks like for them
Yes.
and then go from
Oh
there?
my gosh. Yeah. You know, I think I remember at my baby shower, one of the things that I was given was this book called It Will Be Okay or something like that. And one of these sweet moms was like, this is for you. It's a kid's book, but it's for you. If you need to go into another room and cry and read it by yourself sometime, you do that because it might be more meaningful to you. And I think this is one that can be really meaningful for both in different ways. So if you don't mind, like an example,
Sure.
there's one in particular. I had no idea how she was going to write it or draw it because I had a heavy sigh in the words. I'm like, I don't know how you're going to draw that, but good luck. And she did, and it was great. This one says, I love you in your antics. I love you when you cry. I love you when you hear me make that heaving heavy sigh. Just kind of that. So this is the first one. And then, you know, you can kind of see like the kid is like, what's going on with mom? Or what's going on with dad? And, you know, mom or dad is like, you know, and I think part of it is,
right? Like they'll
yes,
and they will come over and grab your head,
yeah.
what's wrong or something. They're very, very in tune with that.
And even if they don't, sometimes, sometimes, you know, August is 2. So sometimes he smashes me in the head with a tractor and like kind of laughs. And then, you know, there's a part of us that makes it like we assume that kids have the same complex level of emotion and understanding that we do. Like, he did that on purpose. He's trying to hurt me. It's like, okay, no, he's an empathetic kid overall. He's 2. Okay. You know, so, but they pick up on that. They pick up on, if I holler, you know, he reacts to that. I know because I've done it, because I'm not perfect. And I think that's, you know, part of the things on here, when you talk to your kid, you know, what are you feeling right now? When you feel that way, what do? You know, point to an emotion. So if it was, okay, I'm going to point to angry. When you feel that way, what do you do? This is a conversation, right? It's meant to be a jumping off point. Like, you know, when, you know, I might say, you know, when mommy's angry, these are the things that I sometimes do. And you know what? It doesn't help me when I do that. It's not a good thing to do. You know, sometimes when mommy's angry, she gets loud, right? And mommy shouldn't get loud because that's on mommy. That's not about August, or that's not about, right? So if I were to do that, I could talk like that to him and then say, you know, what is that like for you when you hear mommy yell? You know, what is that? Point to what you feel. And that might be hard for you to have that conversation with them, you know? It may also be really helpful. And then, you know, it's hard. Sometimes I don't feel like I know what to do with my angry, when I have a really big angry. What do you ever feel that way? And then they might actually feel empowered to say, you know what? I'm like you, Dad. I'm like you. I don't know what to do with my big angry sometimes. Well, what can we do to help big angry, you know, get out? Because he feels trapped, right? It's like a big angry is just trapped in there. And we have to do something about that. It's not wrong to feel angry. It's not wrong to feel sad. it is wrong to smash your brother in the face when you're feeling angry.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do with angry?
Mm-hmm.
That's an appropriate and healthy thing to do. So I think that if you're a parent that's struggling with emotions yourself and how to regulate them, throw yourself into figuring that out. Whether it's through therapy, through reading books, through whatever it is, in prayer, like just use all of the resources at your disposal, do those things, work hard on it. You certainly have plenty of opportunities to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's kind of like that advice, if you're having I don't know where I first heard this, just kind of the idea, like if you fight in front of your kids, make up in front of your kids. Like even if you apologize in private, do it again in front of the kids so that they see what the conflict resolution looks like, what that healthy thing would look like.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sort of similar that if you are struggling with these emotions, let them see your coping skills, or even say, I don't want to yell, but I feel like I'm going to if I don't get a minute. And they might be very motivated to help you, right? They don't want you to yell. They don't want you to be sad, And the other thing that's important, I think, and I know this is a run on, but the other thing that I think is really important is that anger is a secondary emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You may have already talked about this on here, but anger is a secondary emotion. So there's always something else under it, always, guaranteed. It could be hurt, it could be sadness, it could be feeling betrayed or, resentful or whatever, but like there is something else under there. And it would be a disservice to the emotion and to the situation if we didn't try to figure out what that one was. Mm-hmm. So that's just something else to kind of keep in mind, that figure out what that one is, that driving thing. And there's going to be one for your kid too.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next question, is what are some of the common reasons that children do feel angry? Because to your point, maybe they're scared, but they're expressing anger because mom is leaving or dad is leaving, or some other emotion. But from your experience and, just as a parent, I think for both of us, what are some common reasons that you see that children get angry or express that anger?
Yeah. So while you're talking, I was thinking about those things we see, like all those picture series you see of like why my toddler's crying, if you've seen like, I wouldn't let him stick his fork in a electrical socket, stuff like that, right? And they are funny because our kids try to do ridiculous things. That's why we're trying to keep them alive. And there's this thing where I think some of it's control. Some of it is, there's only so many things that a kid is in control of in their life, like in teens and in adults or whatever. Eating disorders are frequently about control. What else can you control in your life? But there's a lot of stress, then you're going to restrict in that way or whatever, if that's the type of eating disorder you have. Anyway, so with that kind of in mind, I think control is one of them. Because what else can they do, right? They're told a lot of things. Sometimes if you give an option, not overwhelming options, 2 options, this one or this one, instead of like, do you want to have dinner? No, okay, for dinner, do you want this thing or this thing? You want that? Well, you can't have that, but we can have this one or this one. You can pick whichever one you want. I've been telling my son, would you like to put your pants on all by yourself, or would you like mommy to do it? And if we decide that we're not wearing pants, but we're going somewhere, well, you're going to have to wear pants at that point. So you may choose whether I do it or whether you do it, but one of us is going to do it. So I think control is one, because that is hard, and so control is one. I think not getting your way just in general, because isn't that true for adults? We're just more fake about it, right? We throw our own tantrums. We just cloak it better. We're fancier about it. They're a little more honest. They're like, listen, I didn't get what I wanted. So I think that's one. I think, being scared for sure. Being afraid, being scared. Sometimes anger is a more acceptable emotion, whether it's just to them or because they've been trained that way on purpose or by accident. I think those things, sometimes they might discover that if they behave a certain way, they are rewarded for it by getting the thing that they do want or whatever. So I think sometimes all behavior serves a function. So either it's, my emotions got too big, I was scared, I was sad, but sad isn't something that goes over well or that I feel comfortable with, so I'm going to be angry instead. It's a different channel to get things out. Whatever the case may be, I think that's definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm. Erin, I think one of the fears I personally went through in regards to whenever the boys throw a tantrum or they get angry in a different way
Yeah.
was if I let them feel that anger, then they'll think it's acceptable at some point. And what I realized was that maybe I don't know how to handle that anger. So the way to do it is through discipline or go to your room. And that's a way for me to avoid dealing with it. But one of the things that I've been reflecting on a lot is, okay, how can I help him do that? So one of the things I'll use distractions, asking questions. So what's going on? What happened there? Moving them from the emotional part of the brain to trying to think a little bit. I know it's not the same,
Right.
but
Yeah.
questions. And it seems that that helps. But I think one of the things is, as a parent, what encouragement would you give to deal with that anger in that moment? Is it to ask questions? Is it to, I mean, you kind of alluded to it already in a previous response, but just in general, what's a common line of or phrase or line of encouragement that you would give to a parent whenever they experience that anger with their children?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say, as a normalizing sort of thing, for those of you who aren't therapists, because the therapists already know we're not perfect either.
True.
So there's that. Even if we do have an idea of things that professionally we'd be like, oh yeah, you should do that. It's hard to implement it when it's our own kids. When I worked on the child and adolescent psychiatric unit here, it was a lot of extreme things, extreme behaviors, not necessarily problem kids, but kids with problems, kids having a hard time. And it was always kind of funny because the moms on the unit or the dads on the unit or whoever would be like, I'm great with these kids. I'm often like patient and everything here. But when I go home, smaller behaviors that aren't nearly as significant set me off at home. So I just like normalize across the board that parenting is hard. Okay. So like, it's just hard. I'm going to suggest a couple things, but keep in mind that as a disclaimer, anything that I could say, if I claimed that it was a fix in 30 seconds, I think that would be trite. And I think it would be inaccurate. And you would be like, I tried that 30-second thing and it didn't work. Well, it would kind of be dishonoring to the struggle that you've had if it did, right? Because it's only a 30-second fix. I don't have any of those. I don't have microwave fixes. I have ideas for crock pot fixes. It's going to be different for your kid though. So with that in mind, a couple things to note. If we have like our agitation level or distress level on like a scale, because it's a continuum, right? 1 to 10, let's say. They're 3. What you do for a 3 is going to be very different from what you do from like a 10. Because if they're at like a 3, you might be able to say, okay, it sounds like, well, depending on the age of your kid too, and the emotional age of your kid, because you might have a emotional intelligence that's delayed or emotional intelligence that's ahead, which is why I hesitate to ever say like, oh, a 6-year-old should be able to do, I don't know what a 6-year-old should do. It really depends, Yeah. So keeping that in mind, like the 3 out of 10, you might be able to say, okay, I noticed that you're starting to get frustrated, tell me about that. Or if they don't want it, I'll talk about it or whatever. Okay. You don't have to talk about it. Would you like to sit for a minute and have a minute to collect yourself? Or would you like to be angry in this way or in this way? Like if I'm having a full meltdown on the floor, it might be, okay, well, when you're done, come let me know. And then you can walk away, provide space. If it is for any attention, you're not offering it. If it's not for attention and they're having a hard time, you're not saying, how dare you be angry? It's okay. If you'd like to be angry, you are allowed to be angry. You may continue being angry on the floor. Having a meltdown isn't going to hurt them. They're probably going to do it anyway. So, like you may be angry. And sometimes I even say too, like he threw something at the baby the other day and it was like, you're allowed to be angry. Being angry is okay. It is not okay to throw at Gideon. Because injuries, right? It's okay to be angry. It is not okay to throw large objects at your brother's face. right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of differentiating, like, it's not the emotion that you're in trouble for, you know, or if he has a timeout. Actually, this is another note too, real quick. I'm sorry, I'm like around, I'm all over, but I was talking to my mom, venting a little bit is what I was doing, and trying to figure out what works. You know, my brother, they used to send my brother to his room, and he's happy in his room. His room is a happy place. He gets to play all by himself. You send me to my room and I freak out. I'm like, I want to be what the people are, you know? So it's different. So I was thinking, like, I need something that works for him to feel like that wasn't okay so that he doesn't do it again. At the same time, I want to reinforce good things, because the research shows that if you reinforce something that's, you know, that they're doing that's good, that's more powerful than just punishing things that they're doing that's wrong. We have something to move towards. Well, one thing that we started doing was, like, you know, a brief timeout on the step. And I'm talking like 40 seconds. I pause it if he tries to move, you know, just so we get used to it. And sometimes he doesn't like sitting there, and sometimes he kind of does. Sometimes, like, one time I said, would you like to do this thing that I wanted him to do, or do we need to have a timeout for a few minutes? And he said, yeah. And he ran and sat on his timeout step. And I was like, that's not what's supposed to happen. And my mom made the point, was like, yeah, but he sat by himself and he calmed down. So wasn't that a win? And then I kind of checked myself, and I was like, yeah, it was. So if it's just a redirect, then it doesn't matter as much, you know, if he was, you know, the reason that the obedience thing is primarily safety, right? If I say you need to come back right now, because if you're in the street one day and I say come back and you're like lollygagging around, you can get hurt. You know, the obedience thing I'm going to require because it's a safety thing. On the same level, I'm trying not to be inconsistent. So if I say something, I better be ready to double down, which means when I had really super infant, you know, Gideon, if I was feeding him on the couch or something, I had a few less rules. I chose which ones I really cared about and which ones I was like, it's not a big deal, because if I tell him not to do it, I'm going to be correcting him all the time, and I'm not able to follow through. If I can't follow through, I'm not going to say it. So I just altered my rules a little bit. So at a 3, you can do that. At like a 5, you might be able to, okay, let's go look out the window. Let's do something else. Pick something like that, engage them. Sometimes you will talk about it. If we're getting up high, you know, what can you do with your, you know, if you've established coping skills, or play a role-playing game when they're calm. You know, so if they get really, really unreasonably upset when they're doing their chores, then you could do something like, okay, so we're going to play a game and make it fun, do something that they like, where you'll be the mommy and then I'll be the kid, and you'll be the dad and I'll be the kid, and then you're going to come in and tell me to do my chores, right? And then knock, knock, you know, time to do your chores, and then I'll like pretend freak out, not in a fully mocking way, but like, you know, silly, but also like, this is a thing that happens, right? This is great for like 6-7-year-olds too. Yeah, because they like playing pretend games like that, right? And they have the vocabulary to say, as their mom, like as the parent, like, I know, but you have to do it, which is kind of funny to hear them try to do that. And then you're like, I don't want to, and you can have your own meltdown. And then you get to pick one of the coping skills to practice, and then practice doing it, but you're not actually angry. So it's not like learning to swim during the Titanic. It's learning to swim in a safe pool so that when the Titanic happens, you can get to the boat. That's kind of the goal, is like, can we practice building up these skills when it's calmer? Then when we're higher, when we're at a 5 or a 6, we can go ahead and start using that skill. If we're at a 10, if your child's brain is on fire, I'm going to do it. This is your brain. This is your prefrontal cortex right here. This is your thinking, your logic, your motivation. You already know all of this stuff. But they say you flip your lid, right? This is Dan Siegel, if anybody wanted to check it out. This is your amygdala. It's your crisis brain, your 911. It doesn't think so good. It's really good at keeping you alive. And it's fast. The crazy thing about fear response, and consider what this means for your kid, is that the fear response does its full cycle before you get a chance to think about whether or not it should have. So anxiety or PTSD or whatever, you think about those things, but everyday kind of things too. Like if it's triggered, you go through the whole thing and then you go afterwards, oh my gosh, why did I say that? How could I have done that? Oh my gosh, that was so dumb or whatever, because this comes back and thinks about it, but it couldn't at the time. So what you're trying to do, if you're trying to explain or fix something with your kid when they're at 10, you're engaging the part of their brain that is on vacation. Like this part is not there. It's not there. So this is not the time to engage it. You need to wait until they're more calmed down. So all we're doing right now is de-escalating, right? And waiting a little bit. Be patient. Take the time. Because right now, all you're going to do is escalate things. It's just going to escalate. And sometimes just hearing words, they're not going to process it anyway. So it's not saving you any time by saying it now. You know, they're not going to process it. So again, be clear, be concise, and an acronym that I learned during brain spotting training was wait. Why am I talking? You know, why do I really need to be talking? So one example is if you have, this could be for like a 12-year-old or somebody, right? Like they are somewhere dangerous. They're trying to run away and they're on the roof, right? Okay, you might need to say something. Or, you know, they're somewhere and they're about to knock something over. Okay, you can be where you are if you need to, and I will let you be there. If you do this thing, I'm afraid that that's going to hit you. I'm afraid that it's for safety. So if X happens, expectation is I will come and get you out. I will physically remove you if I have to because I'm afraid for your safety. You know, you can say things like that. And, you know, one more thing, like an angry person's idea of spatial awareness is all off. So if you approach it sometimes, you know, it feels like you came a lot closer than you did, right? So be aware of that. Even when we did our physical restraint training for the unit, when we were at the hospital, people at schools often know this sort of training too. Even when you're getting into your stance, which the stance isn't supposed to be scary, it's just so you don't get bowled over. If someone's trying to hurt somebody else, you know, if they're going to punch this person in the face, you want to keep them from hurting themselves or somebody else, which is the only reason you do it for like true emergencies. But if that's happening, even to get into the stance to be safe, you're stepping back, not forward, to get into it. It would be the same stance either way, but you're stepping backwards to give them space and to not appear threatening. So just kind of being aware, like maybe they need the space, and maybe they don't. But if it's a safety thing, listen, safety first. All you're gonna care about at a 10 is, are they safe? That's it. Are they safe? And then wait it out. There was one kid that thought he was at the exit sign one time. I smiled because it was a little bit cute. I know it was hard, but it was a little bit cute because he thought it was the exit sign, but there was an arrow. It was the door to the doctor's room. There was nobody in there. He thought he was at the door to leave the unit, and he was really upset. And so he eventually, instead of, you know, beating on it or whatever, he just kind of like sank down and like was really mad. And I knew if I came up, we would be off to the races again, right? So it was a bonus that he was sitting down. So I picked a spot like 15, well, probably like 10 feet back. So I was like 10 feet back and I sat down and we just hung out, you know, we just waited. And sometimes he would, you know, cry. Maybe he would scream sometimes, but we just hung out. And eventually I watched his breathing. I could tell that things were simmering a little bit. And I just said, we've got ice cream. We've got chocolate milk. Do you want any of that? And he was like, I'm gonna go get that and I'll be right back. And I went and grabbed it and I came back and I just like gave it to him and backed up. We had a snack, calmed down. Also, that's a note too. Maybe they're hungry. I get mad when I'm hungry. But anyway, give them some fuel. It's so real, man. It's so real. So anyway, you know, if they're at a 10, basically, this is really long-winded, but if you're at a 10, are they safe? Wait it out. Once they're calm, you may re-engage and say, you know, talk to me about that. That was really hard, right? This is not the time to lecture, probably. Listen first, because they're not going to listen to you unless you show that you can listen first.
Absolutely. Patience principle, I think it's key, because there's the short-term patience, which is in the moment when they're experiencing the anger, when they're fearful of something. So there's the patience that's needed at that point. And then there's a long-term patience of, you've tried this 3 times. it's probably going to take a
Yeah.
lot more than 3 times for him or her to catch up with what you're trying to
Yeah.
teach them. And I think that's one of the other frustrations maybe that some parents might have, is that, well, I've tried what you said 2 or 3 times and
Right.
it's not working. Well, you need to try it at least 100 times or more times.
Right. Yeah.
Eventually, it kind of connects. Like I remember with Bo, with just picking up his toys, like pick up your toys, 100 times, pick up your toys. One time, pick up your toys. Okay, Dada, and he starts picking up his toys. And but that took so long.
What a moment, right?
Yeah, and you feel
Yeah.
it worked. I just needed to be consistent and patient
Like, oh my
and
gosh.
wait it out. And so I think an encouragement for
I'm
parents,
hoping that'll work out for food for my kid.
right?
Yeah, that
Which
consistency is
is
important.
another tactic that we have as well. That's good.
That's a whole other. Yeah.
But having that short-term patience and then the long-term patience, I think, is something that would be encouraging to parents. But yeah.
The one quick thing I was going to add about so what to do when you're upset, right? Again, I don't do like 30-second fixes because it's catered. When I work with somebody, I tailor it. We build up a toolbox of things that work, and usually we only focus on trying like 2 a week, maybe, to be consistent and really focus on those. And then if you find out, okay, this one was terrible, but I did actually give it a shot, and this one actually was pretty helpful. Great. Some of them are going to work at 3, but they're not going to work at a 10. Use your coping skills as soon as you notice that something's off and you're not at 0. Don't wait until you're at a 10. But when you're trying new things, it's going to be true for figuring out what works for your child as it is working for you. Pick 1 or 2 at a time to practice. Try that for a week and then figure out and then continue the ones that work. But really do try them. Really do give them a shot. Like you said, like, I used to tell some of the kids on the unit too, like I'm telling a lot of unit notes, but it was like, take some deep breaths. And I would start taking some with them and they'd be like, it's not working. And I feel like that's the philosophy we typically have. Like, first of all, that's not what a deep breath is. We're not actually doing it. So you can't say it's not working. And I think we do that a lot, I think that's part of it. We do one of the reasons you do deep breaths for a while is the first few are worthless. All the first few is doing is getting you in the mode so that by breath 10 or 20, you'll be taking quality ones. And that will slow your pulse, slow the rest of you so that your mind can't keep up. It's impossible. So it has to slow down. So take it slow, give yourself grace to be human. That's kind of, actually, that's the dedication to this book. I Love You When You're Angry. I had in there, and I didn't want to botch it. So to anyone young or old who is frustrated, discover that they are in fact human, having good days and bad days. That's kind of the idea, is that you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. We want to normalize emotions. It's okay to have emotions. Emotions themselves are not bad. In fact, they're often very good and healthy for us. So emotions are good. We're going to empower with knowledge. We're going to normalize both for the adult and for the kid. We're not going to lie to children and say that adults don't have emotions. We're going to be honest about them because they know. They'll call your bluff. So yeah, normalize, empower, and open that conversation.
That's good, Erin. That's good. I just had this one last question just pop into my mind right now. And I don't know if it's cultural or, it could be cultural, I guess, Christian culture. But do you think as believers, we often minimize the expression of emotions? We need to be, the Bible talks about being under control, right? To manage our anger, to not let the sun go down on our wrath. And I think as believers, sometimes we forget that there's 2 elements here. There's the human element, which sin has had its impact on our emotions, on our mind, and so on.
Right.
And then there's the other element of listening to scripture and following the principles that it gives. But there's a balance to both. And I think sometimes we minimize the emotional aspect and just focus over here on what we need to do, not really dealing with the emotion. So it happens again. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you see that in Christian circles?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So thank you for saying that. And actually, what I find is when I work with my Christian clients, I don't have research backing this up. It seems to me that the likelihood for perfectionism is quite high.
Yep.
And I think it's different than excellence. It's different than excellence. I had that described to me once by Jenny Bowers, actually. You might know who that is. I think it was her that said this first. That excellence is when you make a mistake, you get up and you note that you made the mistake. You keep going forward. You see, you know, that standard that Jesus set for us. You know you can't hit it. When you do fall, you get up, you learn from it, you move forward. Perfectionism is like defined by the falls. We talk about, you know, we're a failure when we fall, and like it's a whole thing. It's the shame, right? Because guilt says I did something bad, and shame said I am bad. And so that's the difference, because guilt may be of the Lord because it's telling us something's not right in our world and we need to do something about it. Shame says you suck as a human, and that is not of the Lord. So I think it's a lot harder in some ways because Christians see the gap between where we are and where we should be. And instead of being honest about that gap, we kind of like to present ourselves that we're closer to where we want to be than we actually are. It's not overly honest. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's kind of become part of Christian culture that you do that. So, you know, sadness is an empathetic way for us to feel. And when we are allowing ourselves to feel, it can roll through us. It's kind of counterintuitive, but if you try to stuff it, it will be unsuccessful and you'll feel it longer. Would you like to say hello? You are up late, my friend.
Hey.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Bye-bye.
No, that was great. Yeah.
He likes doors.
Popped into my mind last night. I'm like, you know what? I was thinking culturally, and I was thinking Hispanic culture, because for us the anger is seen as positive sometimes, but in Christian
it's
culture,
strong.
Don't show any emotion or limit the amount of emotion that you share. So I think what you shared there definitely was helpful for the audience. But Erin, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your insights and your book, presenting on your book, and how helpful it is to not just the children, but also to the adults. I think
I'm so excited.
Benefit greatly from it. So, guys, buy Erin's book. I Love You When You're Angry, right? And what was the other one?
The Gremlin in My Couch. This is inspired by Lil Goober that just came in as well. It's a hilarious, charming story about the gremlin who hides down deep in cushions in the couch, but something is off with the gremlin. So be aware. Anyway, but check it out. And it was so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, I'll be putting up the links up on the page, and feel free to access everything there. Erin, thank you again. I look forward to chatting up again.
Thanks so much. Yep. Bye.
Thank you again for tuning in today, guys. I really appreciate it. Your support means a lot to me, and I really look forward to doing these each and every week. If you would like to continue supporting the podcast, one of the things you can do is go to your Apple Podcast and find the Genesis of Shame there, and then subscribe to it. That really helps Sid get some traction on the iTunes podcast and will allow this to be heard by many more people. You can also follow me on Spotify and other major podcast platforms. Thank you again, guys. Have a great day.